Because if a 12-year-old starts believing that her needs interrupt people, she doesn't stop having needs. She starts managing them herself. I'm feeling like a lot of us are living from strategies we built as children, as teenagers, before our brains are even fully functioning. And we're calling them our personalities and never realizing we have the permission to update them. Okay, so welcome to this week. It's really interesting. We're in Mercury retrograde, Neptune's retrograding. I put on the cutest outfit today. I have like a leopard skirt, like pencil skirt, very beautiful. And I'm wearing this very baggy avant-garde black shirt. It's like a collared shirt. It's a crop top. It's really cute. However, in this camera, in this recording, I look like I'm about to offer you a fresh stack of breadsticks. I'm kind of feeling some sort of way, but it's fine. Other than that, this week I've been doing a lot of reverse engineering my life through astrology. Now, this is a new series of reels that I'm trying to batch and put out. And I kind of hate starting content series because I feel like, wow, this is a great series. And then I look at the analytics and they like somehow laugh in my face. But there I was during retrograde season, like reminiscing, thinking back to everything I had going on and going backwards. There I was planning, creating a whole ass new series is what it's looking like. Now I did record the wedding ring story specifically because I was exploring Mars. But then I kept exploring a little bit. I recorded one about quitting teaching. And while I was recording that one, I realized I don't ever think I explained how I personally use astrology. So as I'm going through, I'm thinking of the biggest moments in my life and then going back as long as I can remember some sort of a date and going to the date, running the chart, running the times and everything like that. And I did one for the time I bought my own wedding ring. I did one for when I stopped teaching, like when I decided that I was going to stop teaching. And I realized I really haven't talked in depth. I've sprinkled here, sprinkled there, but how I personally use astrology. So if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably noticed that there are thousands of astrologers explaining what Mars means or what Saturn means, or giving you this list of like cute little personality traits based on your rising sign. And look, that content works and it's a hit because everybody likes that content. It's very easy to digest. And I still watch content like that because it's fun. And a lot of times y'all will send me things and like, oh, this made me think of you. But I did realize that I am not that type of astrologer. That's not what I'm doing when I sit down with my own chart. So when something huge happens in my life, I don't really search for any sort of confirmation in the astrology. Now, if it's like shit hits the fan, for sure, I'm pulling up my phone, I'm looking. But I don't really care nearly as much about predictions. I'll look at like probably the lunar return or major transits as I am mapping out my business astrology. But I don't like to micro obsess about every little transit happening. I just want to figure out sometimes why did I respond that way? Why did I give a dirty look this way? That is the part that I feel like me as a neurodivergent person with a background in behavioral psychology, I feel like that's the thing I learned from. I can't go back and change what my responses were, how my face looked when somebody said something. I've always been a firm believer in that. Like, things happen for a reason. It is what it is. But, sometimes people fall out of your life and you're like, what did I do? And then I would look at the astrology and see how I kind of approach things. So I was going through all of this and looking at, why, I stayed in something longer than I should have, why I walked away when I did, why I walked away or didn't walk away when I should have, why I kept doubting myself, why I was earning love. And I already knew the answer, right? Because I'm looking at my chart, and that is my favorite part of astrology. It's less so about predicting events. And for me personally, when I'm looking at my chart, it's more about reverse engineering the version of me that was living through those events with those specific lenses at the time. I think this is also why I finally landed on the name of reverse engineering my life through astrology. Sure, at first, I just thought it kind of sounded cute and clever. We like that. But the more I'm making these reels and thinking back to these moments in my life, I'm kind of realizing it's describing my process. And as somebody who's neurodivergent, this is very helpful. I'm not starting with my birth chart specific and like, what does this placement mean? I'm looking at real moments in my life, breakups, decisions to leave shitty situations. I've had many health crises in my life. I've changed careers, as most of y'all know. But even those small conversations that felt small in the moment, but completely shifted my perspective, I look on those dates. I look back. Thank God I love journaling, because then I can actually look at those dates and when those aha moments are. But then I go back into the chart and then ask, okay, what was happening here astrologically? I'm not saying that, the astrology caused any specific event. I don't think astrology forced me to buy my own wedding ring because free will is a thing. I don't think that astrology made me quit my job. Again, free will is a thing. People still make choices. But I do think that just as the astrology astrologizes, life keeps on lifing. We do have free will. People do make choices, and the stars are still above us, influencing the energies. What astrology does give when you're reverse engineering things is context, which is really important for me. It helps me understand why that particular event landed in my life the way it did, why I responded the way I did, why two people can experience, again, the very similar situations and walk away with very different perspectives. If we can understand the strategy that I built through these experiences, then I can then also decide if that strategy still should belong in my life today. What's funny is that all these reels that I've been making, like, they're helping me revisit stories that I haven't thought about in years. For instance, the wedding ring reel is a perfect example of this. I lived that story. I know how it ends. I know what happened after we got married. I know what happened after everything, right? None of it surprises me. But what does surprise me was sitting there with my finger over the post button and like realizing I kind of am like super embarrassed to share it. I know that my lunar return is like, hey, get super vulnerable, start talking about these things. But because I went to post, right? And I'm like, I started creating these imaginary conversations in my head where somebody's watching like 60 seconds of what I'm talking about and decides they know everything about me and what a loser I am. And then they don't know years behind that story. They don't know the years after that story. They don't even most of the time know, or potentially, right? If this is a random person watching this reel, they don't know me and who I am today. They only will know one moment, and my brain still wants to protect me from being misunderstood. My Chiron in Gemini, 10th house, my Leo, 12th house, all of these get activated every time I post one of these very vulnerable stories. So the more I was thinking about it, the more ridiculous, obviously, I started to feel. Because if you've been around here for any length of time, you already know that I'm not afraid to share and teach through my lessons. Like, put me in front of a whiteboard and ask me to explain medical astrology or herbalism or any forms of psychology, whatever. Like, I'm fine. I can talk for hours. But somehow these little reels where I get very vulnerable for snippets make me so uncomfortable. But I realized these are two different versions of visibility. One is being seen for what I know, teaching. I know that. I know herbalism. I know medical astrology. I know regular astrology, right? I know astrology. I can teach that all day. But the other one is being seen for who we are. Teaching lets people evaluate my knowledge. Storytelling invites people in a little bit to evaluate me, and that makes me feel icky. And I don't like it. And these are very different experiences, and I don't think that I've ever separated those two per se until this week. So the more that I sat with this feeling, the more I realized that it's not actually a new feeling at all. Meaning, it's not an Instagram problem or a social media problem like I originally thought it was, because there's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable on social media. I actually do feel comfortable on social media. However, I am hypercritical of what I'm putting out. Okay. Because at the end of the day, this is my business. And if somebody takes offense or somebody misinterprets, potentially that's a business problem. And this has been a theme for most of my life. I will tell you, when I was working through this and journaling, I was thinking back to when I was about 12 years old. And during this time, my family dynamic changed significantly. And I will tell you, I'm a Sagittarius 4th house, and I have Uranus in my 4th house. So this was an all of a sudden dynamic change that was quite dramatic. Everything in our house felt different overnight. Everything in our house, there was a layer of uneasiness. There was a layer that I lost around the same time of safety. Look, whether it's intentional or not, I did feel like everyone's attention shifted somewhere else. Now, again, I was feeling less safe during this time because around this same period of my time, I was trying really hard to communicate that I needed help. This was about the time that I was starting to be assaulted, and I was trying in the best way I could to have people try to help me, right? But looking back, I don't know if I ever really had the language to explain what I was experiencing. I just knew I wanted someone to notice that something wasn't okay. So when I was thinking about this, and I don't ever feel like my story is like I wasn't loved. I don't even think that it wasn't necessarily that nobody cared. It's just like I walked away with this feeling of like what I need and my needs in general interrupt people and what they want to actually do with their life. And so now, unpacking that at 40 years old, I don't actually know if that's objectively true, right? If I sat every one of my family members down in a room and asked them about that period of our lives, I'm sure we'd all tell a different story. We'd remember different details. We'd emphasize different moments. We'd have our own version of what happens. And again, this is why I love astrology. Astrology isn't asking me to prove whether my interpretation is objectively correct. It's asking a different question altogether. What did you become because of the way that you experience things? They're two different conversations. I've never been interested in necessarily assigning blame. I have had a lot of big family secrets that have nothing to do with me per se, but they've all kind of been rolling out. And one of the most annoying things with my family, is the lies and hidden. Like, if we don't speak up that this person's unsafe, guess what that person keeps doing? Being unsafe. So like, why not just say, hey, that person's unsafe, or in the past that person was unsafe, but now they've worked towards it. It's the lying and hiding and not wanting to be drama. That's a thing I've heard my whole life. You don't want to be the drama. And it's like, but we should be able to talk about bullshit that happens. So I'm not at a point anymore where I'm casting blame. But I am interested in understanding the beliefs that I quietly organize my life around. Because if a 12-year-old starts believing that her needs interrupt people, she doesn't stop having needs. She starts managing them herself. She starts anticipating everybody else's needs. She starts becoming very capable. She's incredibly helpful. Oh my God, you're so independent. How many times as the eldest daughter have I heard, well, we never worried about you. We always knew you'd figure it out. And it's not because this is a 12-year-old personality being incredibly helpful or independent or just like one of the adults. It's not a 12-year-old girl personality. But this is formed because somewhere along the path, this 12-year-old girl brain decided that being useful is safer than having needs, than being needy. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts at astrology, especially as I've been thinking over this like week of Mercury retrograde that we've had so far. There are so many things that I used to think were my personality, and now I see their strategies put in front of me per my astrology. They're very good strategies. They've protected me for many years. They helped me survive seasons of life that I did not think I would get past. But surviving and thriving are not the same thing, okay? And at some point, every strategy deserves to be questioned. When I work with my sun clients, we go house by house and decode every single survival strategy, every potential survival strategy, and like what works, what doesn't. That's why, even though it's a 12-month program, within the first 2 weeks, you are seeing profound shifts and changes in your current life because we're going back and reverse engineering the astrology. When I look at that situation through astrology, the first place my brain goes to, is my 12th house. I'm a Virgo rising, which means Leo is my 12th house. And I know a lot of Virgo risings listen to this podcast. Hey girl, hey. So if that's what you, definitely stick with me for a couple seconds, because I think the 12th house is one of the most understood houses in astrology. If you've ever Googled the 12th house, you're probably like seeing the same keywords over and over, hidden enemies, isolation, self-sabotage, subconscious, karma, hospitals, prisons. These are all associations with the 12th house. But if I'm being honest, I don't think these definitions ever really helped me understand my own life. They're very interesting. Just the way that content where it's like, based on your rising sign, here's your best outfits or something like that. It's interesting, but they don't tell me how the 12th house actually feels when I'm living through it being activated. The way I experience the 12th house is completely different. To me, the 12th house is a kind of collection of, it's like my toolkit. If you've ever been to therapy, you have a toolkit, right? These are a collection of strategies that I built before I was old enough to realize that I was building them, right? Coping strategies. Thinking about that for a second, when you're 10 or 12 years old, you're not sitting there and telling yourself, I've developed an attachment strategy. I have this protective mechanism because, my environment is chaotic. You're just adapting. You're doing the best you can. You're trying to make sense of your world. You're collecting evidence about, okay, this feels safe. They do not feel safe. This gets me love. This gets me attention. This is what it feels like when I'm rejected. This is what it looks like when I'm rejected. This is what we get when we're rewarded, when you get ignored. Children are incredible at pattern recognition. They are like little pattern recognition machines. They're not just learning language, they're learning people. When I am working with kids that are on the spectrum, one of the first steps is match to sample. I do a thing, I lift a pen up and then I go like this, and then I go, your turn, and they lift a pen up and then they turn it vertically, just like I did. They're learning through watching and observing and noticing the pattern recognition. They're also learning energy. They're learning to read the room. By the time we're adults, we've predicted responses for so many years that we stopped seeing them as responses. They're just default patterns. And default patterns a lot of times get called our personality. And I think that's why the 12th house is so fascinating. We're not trying to hide it. It's not the hidden part of ourselves because we're like, ugh, hide that. It's hidden because it is so automatic that we mistake it as a personality trait. So when I realized that one of my biggest beliefs that was running behind the scenes and organizing my personality was that my needs interrupt people. I didn't think, oh, wow, that's a limiting belief. My first thought was actually like, I wonder how many decisions I've made because I worried that my needs were going to interrupt somebody else's life. Beliefs aren't just beliefs. They don't just stay beliefs. Beliefs become our behaviors. They become our relationship dynamics that we're living in. They become our patterns and our relationships with money and within financial institutions. They're our career decisions. They become our parenting styles. I mean, think about how many people that were raised certain ways and it's just like, oh, well, that's how I'm raising my kids. And they never even question if it's good or not, if it sits right with who they are and their soul. It's like, well, that's the way my parents did it, so that's the way I do it. They become this lens in which we interpret every scenario in our life. And that's, again, where I feel like astrology becomes incredibly practical for your daily lives. It's not just to tell you what's going to happen. It's helping me in this moment, and hopefully you, or if you've ever gotten a reading with me before, hopefully it helped you. I do get feedback quite a bit, and the responses are overwhelming that yes, it absolutely helps, because I help you understand why you became the version of yourself that responded that way. That's a completely different use of astrology than the one I was taught when I was first learning. Everybody wants to know what's happening next. I get it. There's, especially in capitalism, there's this sense of I want to control. As a super Virgo, totally get it. I ask those questions too. But when am I going to meet somebody? When is my business going to grow? Is this relationship going to work out? Does he love me? Is he ever going to leave her? Those are very normal questions that I get during readings. But I will tell you, as a reader, as I go along, I'm not really finding those questions interesting. I think the question that changed my life and could change yours as well is, what strategy am I running right now? And it's right there in your birth chart. I can look and tell you exactly the strategy you're running that's either helping your cause or hurting your cause, right? Because we can get whatever outcome we want. But if we're saying we want an outcome on the left, but we're doing all the actions of the right, we can look at the astrology to see like, oh shit, wait, let me identify this strategy. Now I see I have a choice. Now, to take it a step further, I feel like this is where Leo and my 12th house Leo gets really interesting. Everybody talks about Leo wanting to be seen. It's really fun to work with sun clients that are learning about their 12th house Leo, or if their son's in Leo and they're like, I don't feel like a Leo. Leo always wants to shine. They want to create and express. They want to be recognized. And not necessarily that we disagree, but sometimes we don't see ourselves that way. I don't have any Leo placements, but again, my 12th house is Leo, and that's what we're talking about because this is my podcast. But if you have like a sun in Leo or something like that, or maybe you're a Virgo rising and it's a 12th house Leo. When Leo is stuck in the 12th house, for me, it's not wanting attention per se. It's carefully managing what attention I do get. There's a huge difference there. I've never wanted to disappear, right? I don't need to be the center of attention, but I don't necessarily want to disappear. I want to be understood. And think about it. Almost everything I've been kind of mulling over and talking about today over the last week and a half, 2 weeks, has come back to one question. It's not, will people like me or like this reel? It's like, more so, will they understand what I'm talking about? Will they understand me? They're two different fears. If somebody watches my wedding ring reel and says, wow, that wasn't really for me. Okay, cool. But if they watch it and decide that is my whole identity, what if they listen to it and they hear that I got divorced and stop listening there? And they never actually get to hear the astrology in it, freaks me out. Or like if they hear one chapter of my story, my life story, and decide they know me, the whole book. That's the fear. That's the 12th house fear. It's not rejection. It's people reducing me into one single part, one single moment, instead of being understood as this whole person. I like to explain personalities like onions, right? You get to know, you keep peeling back a layer, you're going to get to know the rest. And I think that is a part of why I've been editing. I've been trying to control which chapter of me people get to meet first. I've been trying to hand people enough context that maybe they don't understand me, or it's less likely. The problem is that's impossible. No matter how much context I give you, you're still going to hear my story, but you're going to hear it through the lens of your own life, through your astrology. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what humans do. And I think that's where the shadow side of my 12th house Leo is living. It's not necessarily like hiding under a rock. It's more so editing, trying to manage how visible, how seen I am, but like manage it so carefully that no one could ever reduce me down to one headline. Now, it sounds great in theory. The problem is if I'm constantly editing myself, or if you're constantly editing yourself, you're also editing out the thing that would help you the most. You're editing the exact story that might have been the reason why somebody understands you more. The reason why they found you, right? I'm a business owner. If people hear this story, they might actually be like, oh my God, me too, and be connected to me on this deeper level. Maybe you're editing yourself because you don't want it to make it seem like you're less credible. But that experience might resonate with somebody who thinks that it actually improves your credibility. We sometimes, especially 12th house Leos, but in general, a lot of us edit the humanity, the human side out of our human experiences, out of our own expertise in life. And I don't think that's what Leo wants. Leo wants to express themselves. They don't want to be seen as perfect. They're not mad if they are, but that's not the goal. A lion doesn't roar to be heard in the perfect pitch and a perfect roar. A lion roars because it's a fucking lion. It wants something real. It wants to feel and vibrate and roar and have that come out. So both things were interesting. This like 12th house Leo, but then I started looking at the rest of my chart. And now we're doubling down on how fucking interesting we can get, because it's not just Leo 12th house. My Mars and my Venus are sitting both Virgo 12th house. So now, yeah, we're talking about visibility, but we're also talking about the way I act under pressure and the way I relate to these heart-to-heart connections, to love, to worth, money, receiving. That's the biggest one. And it's all being filtered through this unconscious part of my chart. And again, this is where I think astrology isn't about pinning a personality type. I think this makes me a better astrologer than many out there because it becomes more about behavioral psychology. And that's my fucking wheelhouse. Mars tells me what I am going to instinctively do when pressure starts building. Mars, for me, does not immediately go into fight mode. It's definitely not fucking freezing. My Mars in Virgo is not creating drama. It's going to be real fucking useful. It's going to fix. It's going to organize. Oh, you need help with that? I'll research it, because it's trying to make a solution better before anyone has to ask. For years, sure, I might have been like, well, my Mars is in Virgo, but I don't think that's enough anymore. It doesn't feel authentic enough for me. I think I know now, after my nodal return at about 37, I started to ask a different question around being useful. And like, why did usefulness become my first move? Why, when shit hits a fan, do I go into crisis mode? And again, I've studied my chart a lot, so I do know why. But I don't think Mars in Virgo automatically creates that. I think my life and my life experiences shape how this Mars in Virgo 12th house specifically shows up. If somewhere deep down in my experiences, I learned that having needs interrupted people, then of course my Mars learned to become the opposite. Don't become another problem. Be the solution. Don't ask for help. Be the helper. Right? I needed someone to come get me from a location that I was landlocked on and more or less rescue me. So it's like, don't need rescuing becomes so indispensable that they never want you out of their sight. That's not astrology. That's astrology meeting this lived experience, this human experience. And that's the part that I feel like other astrologers just aren't talking about. And then even look at my Venus. Venus is right there at Mars. Venus is at 0 degrees. Mars is at 4 degrees. I think that Venus might actually be the placement that's making the most of me this year, especially right now, as literally I'm about to have my Venus return tomorrow. Most astrology books is going to tell you Venus in Virgo is acts of service. She shows love by helping. She's very practical in her relationships. That didn't really help me. It's not wrong, but I don't think they're the right questions. They're just observations. And the question I care about is, why the fuck am I doing that? Why did usefulness become so intertwined with my self-worth and being chosen? Why does receiving nice things, receiving apologies, Aaron has to remind me sometimes, like, I'm trying to say sorry, and it's okay that you just say, I accept. Because I'm always like, no, you don't have to be sorry. And I put on my practical brain and go, I did this and I contributed too. And it's like, he's like, I'm just trying to say sorry. Just let me say sorry. So why does receiving the apologies or anything really feel uncomfortable? I can give apologies that are meaningful, practical, sincere, but receiving one? Ugh, no way. And these are all Venus questions. Venus isn't just about romance. If you are in the Sun or the Stars membership level, because the Sun members automatically get a free year of the Stars membership, This is where I teach a class a month to give you a new perspective shift. I deep dive onto philosophies like this, but we have a class in there called the receiving frequency. And it talks about Venus, and I wrote it really around Venus, although it covers way more than Venus. But Venus is what we value. It's what we attract and how we receive. So yeah, relationships with money there, relationships with pleasure there, relationships with beauty there. But it's also a relationship with being chosen without having to prove that we're valuable first. I think that's why I've been thinking about this placement so much lately. Venus moves into Virgo tomorrow. My natal Venus is 0 degrees Virgo. And so almost immediately Venus comes back to the exact place it was when I was born. Now, if you're super brand new, this is called a Venus return. Anytime the planet goes back to the original. So for instance, your solar return is not necessarily your birth date, but when the sun returns to the exact position it was when you were born. Lunar return is every month. It happens with the moon. So Venus return will come back and it's like, okay, where are we now? Venus gives 2 fucks who you're dating. Is this relationship going to work out? It's a deeper question of what are you ready to receive now that maybe we've had a year to learn and grow. So what are we ready to receive now instead of a year ago? We're moving the conversation away from prediction and into growth with this Venus return. When I was journaling today, I kind of sat with the question and I realized that my answer wasn't love and money or like, honestly, even success. It was more of a visibility. And now when I say visibility, it doesn't mean that I do or don't want to go viral. Obviously, going viral helps my business potentially. But visibility in the sense of people knowing me instead of only knowing my work, like that's really important to me right now. And it's not that I haven't been authentic. I have shared many things along the years. But if you know my actual story, you know how much deeper, how many lives I've fucking lived. And I think that that's a terrifying distinction a little bit because I don't think I've ever struggled again with teaching or being front and center and being visible. Again, I love teaching. I could talk about astrology and all that all the time, but telling you about buying my own wedding ring, I'll be honest, that's fucking embarrassing. If a client came to me and said that shit, I'd be like, okay, I guess. I'd probably smile and not say anything, but in my head, I'd be like, damn, you deserve more planning and preparation and thought behind somebody giving that to you. Talking about moments where I fucked up in life and I got it wrong or I made the wrong choice or I chose the wrong person, also embarrassing. Talking and that's me being critical of myself too, right? It might not even be embarrassing, but that's just how I see it. Talking about beliefs that I've carried for decades before I even thought like, does this serve me? Is this how I'm feeling? That's different. Because now we're not evaluating how much I know about astrology and psychology and herbalism and QHHT and have I ever worked with somebody with this ailment. When I share my stories, we're evaluating me. Or at least that's what it feels like. And I think this is where my Venus is kind of stretching me. Venus keeps asking, okay, can you receive? But not just like receive anything, receive things that I say that I want. I've said I've wanted a bigger audience or like to write a book someday. I've said that I want my methodology to reach more people. Okay. So Venus is like, if those things happen tomorrow, would people actually know you? Or would you keep trying to manage every fucking story and perception of you? Would you keep trying to explain everything so nobody could possibly misunderstood me? There's not enough fucking time in my day to do that. And when I'm having one-on-one conversations or even small groups, I have the moment, if I can see someone's confused, to follow up. But the internet, it's just out there, and how they take it is how they take it. So I can never control that. As much as my Leo 12th house and as much as my Super Virgo rising wants to, I can't. I can't polish every chapter until it feels safe enough and edited enough to release. That is not a strategy for life that's good. That's not a good business strategy. Because ultimately, it's a relationship strategy. That's a receiving strategy. And I don't think I realized how much of my business has been shaped by relationship strategies until this month. And then you layer Jupiter into all this shit. And suddenly my timing makes total sense. Jupiter just entered Leo, and everybody online is talking about confidence and visibility and taking up space. And I don't disagree. But again, your natal chart matters. Jupiter isn't just entering Leo, it's entering my Leo. It's entering your Leo. It's moving through my 12th house. Maybe it's moving through your 6th house. So instead of me being like, how can I be bigger? What part of me is going to grow? I've just been like, okay, self, when I'm sitting there, quieting my brain. Is my visibility becoming large enough where I can't keep hiding? I can't keep editing every time. I don't think Jupiter is making me record reels and getting out there more. I think Jupiter is making it energetically harder to deny making those reels. Whenever I have a good idea, I'm like, oh yeah, I should record that. So for instance, you remember those commercials back in the day where it's like, this is your brain on drugs. I was like, that would be hysterical if I did something like that for planets. Now, if you fucking steal this idea, I'm going to be so sad. But it's like, I'll say that, and then in my head, I will over edit it to the point where I'm not even fucking making the reel. So I don't think Jupiter is necessarily creating these moments where it's like, okay, this is your moment, let's go. I think it's making the stories that I spent years editing in my brain finally be witnessed. I think that's why this series kind of happened on accident. I think that's why I'm evaluating a lot of the things that I am putting out. I'm not spending 3 hours editing this podcast so every weird look I have on my face gets edited out. That's just, there's not enough time. And frankly, I'm done doing that. I think it's the expression of the season I am to make the weird pauses and the weird faces, to just put out there what I'm going to do and pretend like everybody understood the message. This season that I'm in, especially with this Venus return, is where my unconscious strategies that have quietly run my life for years are finally becoming conscious enough that I get to choose something different. And look, maybe that's the real gift of astrology, is the awareness. And look, I've always told clients that is the real gift of astrology. It's not fucking prediction. It's having awareness. It's feeling seen. Because that awareness and seeing yourself in that light creates a choice. If I don't know that I'm editing myself, I can't stop editing myself. If I don't know usefulness is my whole ass strategy for belonging, I can't decide whether I still want to live that way or not. After the end of my marriage, I had to think about like, okay, wait, why am I earning the right to receive? So because I didn't know that I was trying to earn receiving, I also didn't know that I spent my whole fucking marriage proving my worth in it instead of allowing myself to just exist and receive nice things. And that is a big reason why I don't think astrology changes your life in a woo-woo way. I think understanding your patterns changes your life. Astrology just gives you a language for finding them. And that's really why I created my newest freebie. I'm calling it Why Am I Like This? It's like a free download workbook. I didn't want to create another like birth chart guide because I feel like there's plenty of those, but I did want to create something that helps you identify one behavior pattern. one strategy, right, that you've been doing. So that way, you know, okay, every time life gets hard, this is the one thing I do every single time. Because once you see that strategy, you start seeing how often you're applying it. Maybe you're applying that strategy in situations that don't even need it. So then you stop asking, okay, how did I get in this position again? Then you're seeing, okay, this is what I thought was the safest way to move. That's a much better aha moment than just like visibility time. That's kind of like the question I ask every time I look at mine or my family's chart. I want to look at what strategy this specific placement is helping me recognize or helping them recognize. Because if I can recognize the strategy, I can have the freedom of choice to decide if it still resonates with me or if it's holding me back. And again, this is why I think my reverse engineering my life through astrology, that whole series that I'm slowly putting together, I think that's what it's all about. It's not me looking backwards because I'm so stuck in my past. I think it's me looking backwards so I can understand my operating systems that I'm running in the background. I'm feeling like a lot of us are living from strategies we built as children, as teenagers, before our brains are even fully functioning. And we're calling them our personalities and never realizing we have the permission to update them. My Mac can update like twice a month and I don't bat an eye, but God forbid I should update my coping strategies. Maybe that's what this whole retrograde is asking me. Maybe Jupiter entering in my 12th house. Maybe that's what it's having me do. Venus return. I mean, pick a fucking thing. It's happening. It's not asking me to become someone different just because, oh, I want to have less of a filter. I just want to be seen more. All of these placements are kind of asking for the same thing, which is become someone who's less about editing and filtering than I was yesterday. And for where I am right now during Mercury retrograde, I think that's enough. I don't think we have to push ourselves so hard. I think just that one aha will speak volumes in my everyday life. So that is it for today's episode and all of my visibility wounds. Hopefully it resonated with you. I did get a new deck from the Stinking Rose. It is called the Oracle of Pluto, and it's an oracle deck, but it uses shadow puppets. Again, if this is your first time listening to this podcast or watching this podcast on YouTube, just know that I typically don't love like whimsical kind of stuff. I like the artwork of something like this. But today's card, here's the back of all the cards, little scorpion on the back. Card I pulled is card 12, or on page 12, which is Friend. Like the Puppet Master, the Friend is a special card. Unlike the Master, however, the Friend operates outside of us. Have you ever heard the saying that other people are mirrors of us? How fucking cool, right, for this episode? That idea is the essence of this card. The arrival of the Friend in a reading may indeed point to an important friend of our lives. It can indicate someone you can turn to when the truth feels muddied or elusive, whose perspective reflects our most authentic selves back to us and helps us navigate the treacherous landscape. However, it's important to recognize that not all mirrors in our lives come by way of loved ones. Sometimes our most potent teachers are those who frustrate or irritate us to no end. Notice that the shadow cast by the Friend is its true shadow. Unlike the other cards in this deck, it's time to turn to a trusted ally and let them know what you're going through. Know that the advice they give you now is the medicine required to remedy the situation. One way to think about this card is also contained in the age-old saying, the antidote is the poison. Ask yourself who in your life is your greatest mirror and what lessons you can learn from them. Think of who you hold most dear and who you absolutely can't stand. Which one is the stronger teacher? You might be surprised by the answer. So I'm just barely getting into this deck. I do love the beginning sentiments as it pertains to this specific podcast episode. All right, y'all, that is it for today. Again, if you would like to work with me, you can head to themedicinalmelange.com, click on astrology readings, and you can pick both virtual and in person. I also will have a link up to my QHHT sessions, which I will open up to the public starting at the end of this month. And if you would like to join the Melange, that is the sun membership, the moon, or the stars, you can head to the link in the description below as well. With that, I hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you soon.